The Lost King was many things, but for me, I took it as a real story of the underdog. And Steve, I was going to ask you first, has it been part of the appeal in telling this story, was just letting the world know that a lot of this, or all of this, was Philippa's doing?
Yes, is the simple answer to your question. When Philippa told me her story, I was a little incensed that the due credit for her search for Richard III, which she led alone, had not been properly acknowledged, and she hadn't been given the due respect for her crowning achievement. And so part of telling the story, certainly for Jeff, my co-writer, and I, was that we wanted to redress that and wanted to put her back up, put Philippa up where she belonged, and redress that story, because it was, I even said to Philippa, I said, the end of your story will be this film. This film will right the ship, which is listing the wrong way, shall we say.
Philippa, I'm sure but many of this has been sort of quite surreal from the moment you first started doing research into King Richard III up to where we are now. And Sally, you've now got sort of one of Britain's best actresses, Sally Hawkins, playing you in a movie. You're sat next to Steve Coogan at a press tour. Has it been quite overwhelming? Has there ever been a moment where you just sort of sat back and gone, blimey?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it started for the first time, you get a phone call saying Steve Coogan would like to take you to lunch. It starts from there. And then I met him, and he was really surprising for me, because he wasn't the larky, jokey about that I almost kind of expected. Very serious, very intelligent, very journalistic with me. And and then he brings on Jeff Pope, so you're thinking, oh gosh, is this the Philomena team? And then they tell me Stephen Frears is really fascinated by it. And then when they say Sally Hawkins is, by this time I'm on the floor, basically, so, yeah.
I mean, the collaboration of creative minds that was so successful for Philomena. When you get back with Jeff and back with Stephen to write again, is there a confidence and kind of comfortability that leads the way?
It's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you think, well, we know we can, if we're diligent, we can do a good job. That's certainly the case. But also is the fact that you feel like, well, we sort of struck gold with Philomena, and so that's quite a high benchmark. And but that's very good. It's good when you're competing against yourself. It's a nice problem to have. But certainly there was a case of, I never stopped working with Jeff, to be honest. We wrote something else in between this and Philomena, and I've worked with him in I did a film that he wrote called Stan and Ollie that I didn't write or produce, but I was in it as an actor. So I always have something on the boil with him. And this story, Philippa's story, ticked all our boxes about, like you said, the underdog up against the establishment. We always gravitate towards those stories, and so we sort of rolled our sleeves up and got stuck in.
Yeah, it's a very textured screenplay, very subtle, and yet has kind of profound moments kind of peppered across. I was wondering what the writing process is like, because when you get to comedic, when it's like two people write a comedy, I always imagine they kind of sit in a room, they sort of riff sort of jokes of each other, and they kind of find what works for if it passes the laughing test. You can kind of see how, Matt Stone and Trey Parker could write South Park. But when it comes to writing a subtle drama like this, is that kind of a process? Do you have to kind of allocate parts to each other? How do you kind of get it done?
Jeff and I literally sit in the room at the same time, and we bounce ideas off each other, and we talk things through, talk them out loud, play out scenes, and we do have a laugh, and we have a laugh about things to do with the script, or we have a laugh about, we go off on tangents like anyone does and talk about, we just gossip, for the first half an hour before we even write a word. But certainly, it's when you're writing a drama, comedy is to me is much more interesting and useful as a tool in your arsenal to use to sweeten difficult subjects and make them more accessible. The real skills when you have to choose when not to do the joke, when you have moments of sincerity and authenticity and being kind. A lot of drama is about conflict, tension, dysfunction, and I'm drawn towards decency and kindness, and there's, I think, a lot of that in this film. in Philippa's story.
Of course, I always appreciate the need for kind of creative license. But you know the kind of visions that the character has of King Richard III. Was that something you had? Did you feel like you connected to him on a kind of ethereal kind of way?
Certainly I don't talk to dead people, that's for sure. It's just a dramatic invention. But I think it was really, really useful. I think in terms of the story that Steve and Jeff bring to life on the screen, I think it works so well. But I think also when I research Richard III, that's, one of my key research topics. And you can see from the materials that from his own lifetime, you can get, from A to B to C to D. But then there's a gap to get to G. And you have to ask yourself questions. Okay, this was happening, and then you got to there. So how did you get to there? So they asked me that question. They said, look, do you actually talk to Richard? And I said, well, not quite to Richard, but I do ask research questions in my head. So they liked that. And then I think that was one of the things that maybe you were thinking of bringing Richard in, weren't you?
We were quite careful when you, as portrayed on screen, have conversations with Richard. We made sure that those conversations could have been conversations that Philippa could have an internal monologue in her head, as we all do from time to time, and it would be consistent with that. So there's nothing that the ghost of Richard tells Philippa in the film that she doesn't already know, so that it can exist as a sort of her own thought process.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Much appreciated, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey You Guys!